Right, we're here today with our Pod Bible cover stars, James Acaster and Ed Gamble of Off Menu. How are you doing, guys?
Feeling great.
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having us on the cover of Pod Bible.
Cover stars.
Cover stars.
It's about time, but
It is about time, right? And it makes it look like we timed it perfectly for your 100th episode. Pure chance, but it looks like we held off. So
Yeah, that is quite cool.
it looks like you held off because you thought the podcast wouldn't last and there was no point putting us on the cover. But now we've had 100 episodes, you've got to now, really.
look, you know that I'm the first guest on a lot of James's failed projects.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
I never like to hedge my bets too soon. So yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
But it's,
What a risk that was, getting Pip on the first episode. It could have all just fallen apart.
yeah, I've just realised I'm the reason
Yeah.
all the other ones have been a failure. That's why.
What else was there?
There was a iPod Shuffle, well, various incarnations of an iPod Shuffle show, apparently. Yeah. So like a podcast one, a TV one, that eventually became an online thing. And Pip's done kind of like multiple appearances on all of those things. And for no fault of his own, they were a failure.
But I mean, Off Menu has been far from a failure. So I mean, how's it been? Because when you started it, did you expect it to get as bloody huge as it's got?
No.
No, I mean, I expected it to last longer than James expected it to last.
Yes, I genuinely thought we'd do 10 episodes and then leave it. And I didn't think that even needed to be a discussion. I thought that's what we'll do. It will be a bit of fun. We'll do 10 of these and then we'll just carry on with our lives.
Well, most podcasts, I think there's a statistic, isn't there, that they last one episode, basically. The average podcast lasts like 1 or 2 episodes. So once we'd recorded yours, I thought, that can't be everything we do. No, honestly, after we recorded the one with you on, I think we knew that there was something there.
Yeah.
It kind of arrived fully formed, really, which was exciting.
Very lucky.
I've never had anything like that happen before.
Not to take any credit away, but how big a role do you think the Great Benito plays in it all?
Oh, he
In it lasted, I mean, because he's very organised.
Yes,
you know.
he does everything.
Yeah.
So quite a big
If
role,
it was us doing it on our own, I think 10 episodes would have been quite an achievement to have got that far. The Great Benito from day one was like, right, we're going to do a photo shoot, so we've got proper professional photos. I never would have thought of that. No. I'm going to get someone to design a logo for it. I want to make sure that a few places do a few articles about it so people know it's coming out. I'm going to start a Twitter for it so that we're tweeting about every episode. None of that would have even occurred to me. I'd just be sitting around, if it wasn't for the Great Benito, I'll probably be talking to Ed now going, how come no one ever liked our podcast? That was a good idea, Ed.
There's so many brilliant podcasts done by comedians, and they haven't done all that organisation, which it's not comedians' fortes, is it? And there's so many out there where they're like, yeah, we've been away for 8 months, guys, but we're releasing episode 4, and you just think, what a waste! Like no one's going to listen to it.
I was going to say, as soon as Brett Goldstein launched Films to be Buried With, which because it was on my little network, I helped with a photo shoot and artwork and that, he sent me a screenshot from David Earl, a.k.a. Brian Gittins, saying, what's going on with your podcast? You've got like a special photo and artwork and all sorts of other stuff. And he'd done about 4 podcasts at that point that I was a huge fan of, but had always stopped after about 20 episodes. And
I think I recorded an episode of a podcast with him and Marek, I think. And they went, this is a pilot for our new podcast idea. That never came out. Failed pilot.
And one of the other things that's happened recently as well is you've both also started offshoot podcasts. So how's that been?
Fun. Both music podcasts. Oh, actually, Ed's done more than me, haven't you, Ed?
Yeah, I've got a few podcasts bubbling away. I've done a music podcast called Lifers, which is like a heavy metal documentary series. Let's call it a limited series, which people say, don't they?
Yes.
But they tend to call it a limited series before they release it. I'm saying now it's a limited series.
You see, the funny part here is Stu had the exact opposite problem. His Off the Beaten Track was meant to be a limited series. He was going to do 8 to 10 episodes each series. He now puts out about 4 a week.
Yeah.
It's the complete opposite issue.
Yeah, so there's that, and the Taskmaster podcast as well, which sort of looks after itself. So that is limited based on how many episodes of Taskmaster they do. And then also do radio show, but people go on about that being a podcast. It's not. Just edited radio show, isn't it?
Kind of is a podcast.
How is it on the Taskmaster one having the resource of the Horn Sweatshop, as I like to call them? Because he does just have them churn out all sorts of variations of theme tunes. It's a wonderful gift.
Oh, it's
right?
great, and we've got all of that. We've got all the sound effects. We've got all the clips from the show. I mean, it is. I just waffle in between. It's great. It's good fun. But it doesn't. Off menu's the main one. Don't worry, James.
I don't mind, Ed. I can share you with people. You're a talented man, and that talent should spread far and wide.
Okay. Well, that's nice that you think that, because I want to have a word with you about your other projects.
Uh-oh.
Knock them on the head, man.
How's that been, though, James? Because, again, if there were two things that you would dream of being your work, it'd be talking about food and talking about music, right?
Yeah.
So that's the beauty of podcasts, is we can kind of go, here's what I do for a job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rather than having someone else make it and then employ you. You go, here's what I do. I talk about this thing that I like.
Delighted. I mean, as you know, as we've already talked about, tried to get various music projects, podcasts or TV things off the ground for years and not quite be able to make them work. The iPod Shuffle one was like always a problem because people never knew what songs were coming up, and then they had to clear them if they could play them and all that stuff. So it was just a nightmare. And it's been great just to be able to do a podcast where I just talk about a different favourite album every week with a guest who hasn't heard the album before. I've sent them a week in advance and we just talk about it. And it's been a real nice exercise as well. In like, now, it used to be people could really hurt my feelings if they didn't like an album that I liked, and they could really tear it apart in front of me. And I'd go away and think, oh, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't know anything about music. And then with this podcast, it's just been quite a nice, exercise in it really is subjective, and we can just have a talk about the album. And I don't need to go away and think, oh, maybe Felicity Ward was right and that album is bad. It's just like, no, Felicity Ward is right and I am also right. And hopefully the listeners get that from the podcast as well. Who knows?
And hopefully the musician doesn't listen to it and here's Felicity Ward saying it's bad.
Yes,
oh dear.
But sometimes they do, and sometimes I hear from them.
It's one of the things I love about the podcast is the vulnerability of it, because although we're joking about it, like everyone will know, putting on a film with a mate or a new partner that you love is one of the most vulnerable. It's more vulnerable than anything romantic or sexual. Yes. Putting on particularly a comedy that you adore, and having someone else not react or react in the wrong way is
well, that's why
painful, and that comes on the podcast.
You've got to choose carefully who you send each album to, because sometimes what you want is a good episode. So you don't necessarily want everyone to agree with you. You just want the episode to be good. So if there's an album that I know is really difficult or really weird, I have to either send it to someone who's going to love it or someone who's going to hate it with a passion. Otherwise, there's no point sending it to anyone who goes, I just didn't get on with it, really. Then that's a really boring episode. So, like, as often as I can, I go, right, I'm sending Death Grips to Sindhu V, and we'll see how this goes. And weirdly, she liked it in the end. I was quite caught off guard. And then she really got angry at the Glitch album that I sent her. So, it's people surprise you.
Well, I mean, just on the creating during a pandemic, I guess. How's it been, back to off menu, because that is what we're here to talk about. How's it been recording over this period? Because one of the reasons the organisation of the great Benito came to mind was you walked into the pandemic with a hell of a load of episodes backed up and ready to go. You'd recorded a load in New York, so you've been able to kind of mix and match of recorded in person, recorded over Zoom. So how's that been?
I don't think we can say that's part of the Great Benito's organisation, that we got loads in the bank before a pandemic, because that would suggest he really knew that this was all coming. And I'd be a bit cheesed off if Benito knew about the pandemic and didn't
all of a sudden the Great Benito is sounding like a supervillain name, isn't it?
Signs were there all along. Has been good though, haven't it? Because we just wanted to go on a holiday together, really, and eat food.
Yes.
and we're like, oh, here's a good excuse, is that we'll say that we have to go there for the podcast and interview people. And we had no idea that the whole world was going to just grind to a halt, and that we wouldn't be able to go abroad for ages, and that it would be harder to record podcasts. Although it's kind of been pretty easy, right? But if anything, this shows that we could have just stayed at home and done all those New York episodes.
There's no way we can have that as an excuse to go abroad anymore.
No.
Because we've had international guests, and it's way easier to get them on Zoom.
Yeah, but the beauty is you've got a food podcast, and Deliveroo is limited.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So sometimes you need to go to other countries.
Yes, exactly.
and have these new restaurants.
I think they are, but I wouldn't say they are better in a room, because we've had some amazing episodes over Zoom. And once you get used to that rhythm, I think it's pretty much the same. But there's still, I massively miss the experience of being in a room together and recording. Like, magical moments on Zoom podcasts are 10 times more fun in the room.
Imagine if we'd be able to kick Jade Adams out to her face.
Yeah. Just incredible.
So you're going to look, I imagine, as we're finding ourselves coming out of this pandemic now, you're going to look to get back in the studio pretty soon?
I think so. Well, we'll see. There's no rush, really, I don't think. But also, I'd be really interested to see how people feel about it. Whether guests will want to come into a room, or whether now that you can do it so much quicker just over Zoom. Yeah. If people are doing PR and doing interviews, what's the best option? Running around town and going to loads of different offices, or being able to sit at home and do way more interviews and just knock them out in a day. I mean, even saying that, I hope no potential guests hear that, because I would prefer they came into a room with us.
Listen, if I'm a guest on the podcast, I am not leaving the house from now on. If I'm hosting it, fair enough. But if I'm a guest, forget it.
Yeah.
Did it feel weird at first doing it over Zoom, or had you been on other podcasts before you'd recorded an off menu remotely?
I think we resisted it for a while, but I think our first one over Zoom might have been Ramesh. Yeah. So that was fine. Whenever it's someone you know quite well anyway, and they're going to be good, and they'll be prepared and they're funny, you're sort of relaxed about it. I feel way more nervous over Zoom when it's someone you don't know very well, because you're battling with tech stuff, and you're battling with having to get to know somebody and not sure how they're going to pitch it. Or in the room, it's kind of all right. If you're next to someone and you can see their face and you can see how they're reacting to stuff, I think it's easier to play when you don't know them. But I think once we got into the rhythm of them, it was kind of fine, wasn't it?
Yeah. Although I quite there's all that worry that, everyone's going to shout over everyone and stuff like that. And because everyone's worried about that, everyone actually just gives each other quite a lot of space to talk. Yeah. And then I actually prefer, when I listen to, and occasionally I do listen to podcasts, I overhear them when my girlfriend's listening to them, and I do think I actually prefer these ones that are recorded over Zoom, because there's no one chipping in over the top of one another and stuff like that. I actually can just listen to someone get a full thought out. So I don't know, maybe I prefer it, Ed. Me and Ed actually haven't had this conversation yet.
Yeah, that's true.
I love the idea that going forward, the genie is going to be on an iPad.
Amazing.
So Ed will be in the room, and James is refusing to leave his house.
The only reason why I would want to be in the room, actually, is because I have missed scaring people by shouting poppadoms or bread. Because it's not the same. I lean in as close to the mic as I can, and they just go, oh, okay, and then answer it, and I haven't made anyone jump for ages.
Even if they don't know what's coming, I think.
Yeah, even if they...
Which most people do. I think now we're also in a situation where a lot of people we interview have heard the podcast before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, ahead of cracking on with the gifts, just you mentioned overhearing some podcasts there. Just before we get on with that, what podcast you been listening to over the pandemic?
Good James, question. Quick answer for you, I'd imagine.
Yes. Well, the main one that I've overheard a lot of the time is Catherine Cohen and Pat Regan's podcast, which I think, I can't remember what it's called now, even though there's a really good jingle for it, and they are so funny in every episode, and I really love overhearing it. So I would recommend that podcast.
That's a perfect recommendation. Yeah. Not only is it the only one you've listened to, you don't know the name of it. This is the best recommendation.
It's maybe called Seek Treatment or something.
I think it is called Seek Treatment. Yeah,
it's great.
How about you, Ed?
More than that, and I listen to them in headphones rather than sort of eavesdropping. I tell you what I'm listening to at the moment, which is absolutely fantastic, and I reckon you'd like it as well, James. It's a podcast called Welcome to Your Fantasy, which is a podcast about the formation and the scandal surrounding the Chippendales.
Brilliant.
And
Wow.
it is phenomenal. It's an amazing documentary. It's a crazy story. And yesterday, they announced that they're doing a TV show about the Chippendales, and Kumail Nanjiani is playing Steve Banerjee, who is the founder of the Chippendales.
Oh, wow.
Who is, if you listen to the podcast, an absolute nutcase. So that's really exciting. Like, I definitely
That
listen
sounds
to that.
amazing.
And I get all of my podcast recommendations from Matthew Crosby, who is my co-host on Radio X, who somehow, despite having a child and the busiest writing schedule I've ever seen, listens to podcasts all day. And another one he suggested was one called Rabbit Hole, which is a New York Times podcast about the dangers of YouTube and about people following, and algorithms. And when you watch a YouTube video that has one political view, YouTube just feeds you more of that. So you just get sucked into this rabbit hole. And then the last episode of that is about QAnon, and it's just mind-blowing. Like the whole QAnon thing. There's so many podcasts about QAnon that are just insane. So I've been listening to a lot of stuff like that as well.
I love that. They both sound fascinating. I've not heard either of them.
The Chippendales one is a lot of fun. I'd definitely listen to that one.
Yeah, onto that. Well, we've got you a gift, so I think it's time to open the gift. I sent you a nice tube. I'm hoping it's all survived.
Love the tube.
It looks like it survived, whatever it is.
Can I use my scissors?
Unless it was a living animal or needed to go in the fridge, in which case, no.
It was a living animal that didn't need to go in the fridge.
And I do appreciate that the sender is Woke Fagin.
Yeah.
Yeah. That. Well, I mentioned that at the start, and James didn't know that was one of his jokes because it was his joke on the drunk cast, and he's forgotten everything
Do
from
not
that.
remember that. I remember. I remember after the drunk cast, literally walking around my house naked, trying to make myself sick, and saying to my girl and asking my girlfriend to kill me. Literally, that was what was happening.
That's definitely one I would have preferred to record in person, because shutting the old laptop lid after you drunk 2 bottles of wine was a pretty bleak feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're suddenly very alone.
I really did not realise how drunk I was until closing the laptop. And then it all hit me at once, and I was like, oh dear, this is going to be the worst night of my life.
My favourite part of your paranoia about how drunk you were the next day was on the part before the last part. I tried to wrap things up, and you two both waved new bottles of wine you've just opened at me and said, "Come on, guys, we've just opened a new bottle.
Well,
Let's
it's a
keep
drunk
going."
cast. I'm not drinking a bottle of wine, am I? You know, do that on a Wednesday.
What's this? Here we go. When do we pop
So
the
much
tops? I've
so
got
much
rid of
bubble
the tape.
wrap.
Oh,
Yeah.
Ed's in there already. Oh, I'm losing the race.
Oh, right. I thought you were...
Here we go. The bubble wrap.
Which is a treat in itself.
I can't wait
we
to
all
pop
know.
all that later.
Yeah, there's a lot of bubble wrap. It was an awkward size to find a tube for, if I'm honest.
the rat.
Right, here we go.
It's great. Da-da-da-da-da.
Oh my god! That is amazing.
Now. Look at that!
That is so cool.
Look at that!
I
So
absolutely
there we go.
love
We've
that.
got you your own off-menu wine, which does need to be chilled. So you'll have to just,
Wow.
Last
drink
Supper
it separately.
wine.
Oh, thank
that-
you
and let's-
guys. That's amazing. That's so
That
nice.
label is just incredible. So
Well,
that's
if-
the cover art, yeah?
If you open the black thing it was wrapped in, that's a print of the cover
Oh my
art
god.
Ah.
Amazing.
for each of you. So you can now have a good look at your wonderful likenesses.
And I have no issue with putting things on the wall of my office that feature my own face.
I love it.
Oh, amazing. That's so
Oh, got a
cool.
sticker. Oh, this is incredible.
Look at that.
Look at those
That
two
is
handsome
beautiful.
dudes.
I'm glad that I'm holding a piece of cake.
Hey, do you
Yep.
want another artwork, a piece of artwork exclusive?
Yeah, do.
So we did our 100th episode recently, as you say, and we hit 50 million downloads.
Amazing.
That's incredible.
And the great Benito said, "I'm sending you something," and he sent us. I mean, God knows how long he's been planning this. A golden poppadom, a framed golden
Oh,
poppadom
wow.
Oh, that's incredible.
to celebrate.
Apparently
So
they
that
put a
still needs to go on
poppadom
the
in a
wall.
3D printer, is what they did.
That, next to that, I'm going to look like an absolute egomaniac.
Yeah.
I've told this story before, but I remember I was in B. Dolan's studio with Sage Francis, and as a lot of us do, we'll have tour posters on the wall and stuff like
Yeah.
that, things we're proud of, and he's just loading up a beat to play him, and then Sage, there's just a bit of silence, and Sage just goes, "So who's the B. Dolan fan?" And it's now my go-to in any comedian's house I go to when they've got posters of themselves on the wall. So who's the Ed Gamble fan? That'll be me, Ed Gamble.
To be fair, I do also have, which has been on my wall for far too long, so it's coming down, just the James Acaster poster.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful.
To balance things
That's-
out.
Yeah,
That's what I like to
appreciate
see.
that.
None of
I'm
it's on the
looking
wall,
around to see if I've
to be
got any Ed Gamble posters in my house.
don't think people... Don't worry, I do.
Awkward.
Well, gentlemen,
Thanks so
Thank
much
you
for
very
that.
much
What a lovely,
for
what a
taking
lovely
the time.
gift.
Amazing. What kind
Yeah.
of
what I'm going to ask is,
so many questions?
get it chilled, and then send me a little video when you're having your first tasting,
Yeah.
and let us know what you think.
What's
do.
the...
And then we'll sling that on the end.
What is the wine? Have you rebadged another wine, or have you specifically
we've-
commissioned a vineyard?
We took all of your tastes previously expressed on off menu, and we had a specific wine made, small batch, 2 bottles
Yeah.
to your exact taste. So
So you took all of the things we like and put it into one wine. Well, I've got to say, this is going to be disgusting.
there's a lot of cheese and a lot of ice cream.
Oh, incredible. Thank you so much.
No problem at all. And thank you for, aside from being our cover stars and answering the questions wonderfully, thank you for the podcast. It is one that we've featured a load along the way because it's just been, as I said, you've found a format that's just consistently entertaining, and hearing people talk about food. I've had to turn it off before because I've been on a healthy period, and for some reason, anytime someone talks about Indian food,
Yeah.
that's the one that I can't help but then order. Anything else, I can go, normally it's because it's out of reach. It's in London or somewhere like
yeah.
that I can't get it. Anytime it's Indian food, I'm like, oh, I might get an Indian.
Yeah,
I might
do
get a
that.
beer on the way home and get an Indian tonight.
A lot of
So-
times after recorded episodes, we've got. I've actually got a question for you though, Pip. And sorry if I asked you this on the drunk cast and I have now forgotten about it. But when we kicked Jade Adams out of the Dream Restaurant for choosing the secret ingredient, obviously until that moment, we kept on getting shit for not kicking you out on the first episode because you chose pomegranate seeds. Do you hear about that a lot from people?
I do hear about it, and I still claim a technicality. I chose halloumi fries.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then when you were saying about anywhere particular, I was like, oh, there's this one place. And they even put in pomegranates things. I didn't specifically choose it. I was just, I claim it was anecdotal, just talking about the food on the way.
Yeah.
That's my get out. But yeah, as you've said numerous times as well, is quite understandably, it's the first ever episode.
Yeah.
It'd be really awkward. It's mind blowing that I chose it. I mean, I think you've got overly cautious now by choosing things like tooth kind Ribena. Incredibly unlikely. I think I've given you a complex, but if you pick anything that's slightly possible, it's not going to be there. But or you often go for dessert things now, like hundreds and thousands and stuff like that. Because if you kick them out at the end, hey, great ending.
Also,
Whereas mine was a starter or a side. It would have been very awkward.
You'll notice that we tend to go for more sort of specific weird things when the guests are higher profile people who we don't know very well.
Yes.
Who we've managed to get, and we don't want to piss the PR off more than anything.
Mate, I would have loved it if you'd had to kick Todd Barry out, because he clearly didn't know much of what was going on. Thoroughly enjoyed it and a wonderful episode, but if at the first meal you had had to kick him out, it would have been gold.
I think
But
he just would have accepted it. Yeah. All right.
shuffled out,
And then
give him the
he would have just walked out.
he would have got on with his life. A strange thing happened today.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, gents. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you
Cheers,
so
guys.
much.
Thank you very much.
So generous.